Hi everyone, my name's John. Welcome back to my channel. You may notice that the angle of this video is a little bit different than it usually is, and that's because I bought a new webcam. So let me know what it looks like. It also has a built-in microphone apparently, so the sound might be a little bit different, hopefully slightly better. But let me know. I read 4 books this month. Well, I finished one and made really good work into the 3 others. So I'm using this opportunity the last weekend of every month to tell you about what I've read. So this is my monthly April accountability video for my channel. Let me start off with a book that the only piece of fiction I read it with someone I know in the Historathon Discord. And we decided to read Catch-22. I had never read this before, and I think it was the first time for Brendan, the guy I read it with. This is it's sort of a 20th century classic, but I don't hear it being discussed too much on BookTube. It's about Captain Yoserion, who is a bombardier in the U.S. Air Force, and his attempts to get out of military service by basically malingering as someone who is insane. Well, not insane, but malingering. He pretends to have a series of physical ailments. And it's a really interesting meditation on how you lose your sense of identity, how you lose your sense of almost individuality in an organization that is as big and faceless and bureaucratic as the U.S. military, especially in a time of war. And it's also deeply funny. I have a couple of qualms with the book. I think the biggest issue with it is that there are too many characters. There's probably 20 or 30 main characters in the book, and he tries to flesh them all out with different personalities, and sometimes they're hard to keep track of. But the way he characterizes some people is really, really effective and hilarious. I have, like I said, about 100 pages or so left to go. I've set it down for a book I read with another group in Historathon and a couple of other things. So I need to get back to it before the month is up and I start all of my May books. Let's do the book that I actually finished just last night. This is from Yale University Press. It is one of my bookish Christmas presents from Christmas. Christmas presents from Christmas. And it is Matilda. So, Matilda, Empress, Queen, Warrior by Catherine Hanley. And for some reason, the paper in the physical copy of the book, if you're obviously reading an ebook, you won't know this, but it's really thick and almost kind of feels like cardboard, honestly, which is a little weird because it's one of the first times I ever remember having to almost crack the spine of a book. But hopefully it's not too noticeable because I hate when that happens. But this is the story of Matilda, who was the daughter of Henry I, the mother of Henry II, and tells her story mostly through contemporary accounts of people like William of Malmesbury, Robert of Torigny, and other 12th century historians. She was meant to be, and should have been, the first Queen of England, long before Queen Elizabeth I. But her cousin, whose name was Stephen of Blois, basically came in and stole it from her before she could consolidate power. Her father, Henry I, had deliberately set out for her to be his heir, and she had it stolen from her, and she spent the next 20 years fighting a war called the Anarchy, where they basically razed the countrysides of England for, well, like I said, 20 years. And they finally settle on an agreement between the two of them, Matilda and her cousin Stephen, in which Matilda will never become queen, but Stephen agrees that Matilda's son, who grows up to become Henry II, will become queen. So in the regnal line, her name is completely missing, but her father's name is there, and her evil cousin's name is there, and her son's name is there, but she's not, which is kind of a very bittersweet symbol of, as Catherine Hanley would probably say, what medieval England did to, well, probably medieval Europe, did to women. Effectively wrote them out of history, or at least minimized their importance and their presence. And she was a real medieval hero, kind of. And it's sort of a book of reclamation history, putting Matilda back where she belongs in high English medieval history. And it's a centrally important life, I think. Not only because of the men she was related to, but because her own life is fascinating in and of itself. Like I said, I read this with a couple of people from Historathon, really greatly enjoyed it, and I have, let me see if I can find it. Yes. Two Houses, Two Kingdoms. Also, I did not read this month, but also by Catherine Hanley. Also got for Christmas, by the way, Two Houses, Two Kingdoms, A History of France and England from 1100 to 1300 by the same author. And this is about the Capetians in France, of course, and the Angevins in England. And I might be reading this in May with the same group. So we'll see if that happens, and if it does, you'll hear about it during the last weekend of May. I read the last book that C.S. Lewis ever published. In fact, I don't even think that he lived to see it published. It was published posthumously. And this is a wonderful little book that Canto puts out. I love the stuff that they put out, and usually grab them when I can. This is The Discarded Image, an introduction to medieval and Renaissance literature. The subtitle there is a little bit humble for what this is. It's not exactly an introductory text, but what it is an analysis, albeit a short one, of how medieval and to some extent Renaissance people and authors mostly understood and built models of their universe. And when I say universe, I mean the physical universe, how they understood the solar system, how they understood the firmament, the various creatures that lived in the world, angels, fairies. And I think what I like about this book most is, one, it's very densely argued. There's a lot of argument going on for 200 pages. And also that you get discussions of authors that you don't really hear discussed in, well, introductions. So instead of just talking about people like Augustine or Aquinas or Boccaccio or Chaucer, you get people like, he opens up the book with a discussion of Cicero's Somnium Scipionis, which is from Book 6, the last book of the De Republica. And then he goes on to talk about Lucan, Statius, Claudian, And Apuleius, I think of those, maybe the only ones that we read are Cicero and maybe Apuleius. But he doesn't talk about the famous Apuleius. He talks about De Deo Socrates. And then part 2 is Chalcidius, Macrobius, the pseudo-Dionysius, and Boethius, the famous Boethius, who wrote the Consolation of Philosophy. So that's the first 90 pages, the first half of the book. I like the fact that you don't just get the most famous authors, that he's really sort of excavating work that is not widely known and not widely read. So if you love medieval history of ideas, where those ideas came from and how they became influential throughout literature and in just the popular medieval mind, The Discarded Image is good. Very good. And last but not least, I read a book that was sent to me gratis by Yale University Press. I'm sorry, it's not Yale University Press, it's University of Chicago. And this is by Sarah J. Charles. It's called The Medieval Scriptorum, Making Books in the Middle Ages. And I've shown this to you before in a set of books that the University of Chicago sent me, but I'm just sort of in love with all of the full color plate illustrations. You can see they're showing a medieval book binding there, and this is the Codex Aureus. But this is a history of medieval bookmaking that's really heavy on the material, physical aspects of bookmaking, like leather binding, how they made vellum, how they made parchment, how they made certain inks, the minerals that went into the inks, how they were ground, writing utensils. And it's less of a discussion on the dissemination of ideas from the books and very, very heavy on how the actual books were made. And it's really interesting if that's your thing. So it covers that sort of broad expanse of time from late antiquity to the rise of the printing press in the 15th century. So that was the last book I read this month. Let me know what you're reading in the comments. Also, please be so kind as to let me know about what this video looks like and how it sounds. I would really appreciate it. And I will be back soon with more reviews. I'm still catching up on them. I will talk to everyone soon. Bye.